Teachers, what was the worst thing a substitute teacher did while you were gone? Back when I was a teacher, I had a sub decide my plans weren't good enough for her and went rogue. She decided to show my students videos of animals giving birth on YouTube. I taught English. I'm a little late to the party, but here as goes. I had a grade 1 half class last year and one student had diabetes. Let's call him Adam. So Adam had a cell phone that beeps when his blood sugar is too low, high. It's connected to the monitor in his arm, hip. The cell phone has no other uses, no apps, no data, not connected to the school Wi-Fi. The substitute saw his phone on his desk and promptly took it away as per the no devices rule. During gym class an EA comes in to make sure everything is okay, and Adam is visibly ill. Pale, sweating the whole works. Luckily this EA knows Adam's medical plan, instantly asks the Adam for the phone and he explains that the substitute took it away in the morning. The EA then loses IT on the substitute demanding the phone. The substitute calls in the principal to reprimand the EA, then get reprimanded herself as obviously she did not read the student's safety plans. She was asked to leave and the principal taught the class the rest of the day. Adam was fine, drank a couple juice boxes and had a granola bar. Mom picked him up shortly after. This happened to my colleague, but I was the classroom next door. My colleague was showing Clash of the Titans at the end of the year after a unit on ancient Greece. There is mild nudity at the beginning and the end of the movie, but they were in the middle of the movie so there shouldn't have been an issue. He left the video paused at the right spot. We still had VCRs like 10 years ago when this happened, but the sub somehow managed to show both the nudity at the beginning and the end of the movie. The nudity scenes were hours apart and the class was only 40 minutes. Then, the sub wrote an email to the principal about how my colleague made him show nudity. Not a teacher, but I know this was a disaster for my teacher. We had been studying Romeo and Juliet and West Side Story and our teacher had created a very comprehensive exam where we would be asked to compare and contrast characters, situations, and themes of the two as answers to some very specific questions. He had spent countless hours ensuring that it was fair and complete. We were going to have the exam the following Monday and he was taking Friday off, so he told us that in addition to the weekend, we should also use Friday's class to prepare for the exam. His instructions to the substitute were likely something like, tell them to prepare for the exam. They already know what to do. She marched in and shouted, prepare for an exam, and proceeded to hand it out. Of course, we protested, but what substitute hasn't heard? We're not supposed to get the exam today, from a class at one time or another. When Monday came, the teacher was devastated. He could not count the scores, he wouldn't even attempt to grade it. He did not feel right giving the exam now that we had seen it. All the work he put into it and all the insight he suspected he might gain from scoring it were lost. Instead, we spent the day reviewing what we could have, should have, would have answered. As you can tell, I could really feel his pain. Not a teacher but the sub made the handicapped classmate who has muscle, joint and vision complications go grab his textbook from his home room. He's not completely helpless but when it comes to heavy things, he needs help. Classmate's homeroom was halfway across campus and the required book consists of 5 large text volumes because they're specifically made for his poor vision. He can't wear glasses either due to complications. I offered to help because I'm usually the one that goes and grabs it for him during normal class but the sub yelled at me saying he knows my kind and I'm just trying to get out of class. Sub told me he's not there to play games and for me to quit it before he sends me off to the principal's office. Needless to say the entire class was shocked. Classmate came back with another student from the homeroom requesting that next time the sub sends someone else to grab the books because my classmate can't carry it by himself. When my usual teacher came back we requested the sub not return because of what he said to us and did to classmate. My teacher wrote an email to the principal about it and that was the end of that. I came back after being gone one day and my students told me the substitute teacher flipped over tables in a rage and was escorted from the building by a cop. What actually happened is that the sub left the room to take a 20 minutes phone call and the kids thought it would be funny to flip the tables over. The substitute then had to flip the tables right side up while yelling at the kids. Then, during lunch, my special ed Co-teacher came into my room to set up and caught the sub making out with a student. Turns out she was 18 to his 25 and the 20 minutes phone call was to set up the lunch meeting. The principal then had him escorted from the building by the resource officer. This is why I say having a sub is more work than just coming into school my damn self. Edit. Wrong version of principal. Didn't do anything to the kids, per se, but told the kids that the reason I was out was because my mom was having breast cancer surgery. I teach K5 and I specifically didn't tell the kids because I didn't want them to worry. So, when I came back, I had a bunch of kids come up to me asking about my mom, which was so sweet, but not something the kids should have had to worry about. When I was a substitute, I got a lot of requested jobs because the substitute pool was poor. One such example given to me was a substitute who would just go to sleep. I barely believed it. Once I was teaching full-time, I had a sub come in for a day. When I got back my students told me that he told them to leave him alone, sat down, and went to sleep. I believed it then. Not a teacher but I vividly remember one incident of having a substitute in kindergarten. I had an infected cut on my toe and had been prescribed an antibiotic. That morning was the first time I took it. We were sitting on the floor for roll call and I remember this burning pain in my abdomen, and she told us to get up and go to out desks. I tried to get up only to realize I couldn't move and just laid back. This sub was a total cow and I remember she was always really mean. Anyway, she starts yelling at me for being attention-seeking and basically tries to pull me up. I am in so much pain I start screaming and one of the teachers from the classroom next to ours comes, realizes I am not faking it and calls an ambulance. Long story short, I am horribly allergic to penicillin and my kidneys were failing. I was in hospital for almost a week before I got discharged. Needless to say that absolute bitch was not allowed back at the school, but I will never forget that day. Gave out snacks I bought with my own money that I kept for kids who stayed after to get tutoring. Threw out a broken electric pencil sharpener that kids broke in front of her. Which again, I bought with my own money and couldn't get replaced by the company because I had no product to send back. I still don't have a sharpener for my room. Let the kids go through my things in my cabinets and desk. Lost a bunch of stuff that way. Rearranged my room. Not in a, moved student A away from student B and put her by student C, way. In a, move the giant rug over to the opposite corner of the room, and completely change the layout of student desks, and rearrange a bookshelf, way. I was a teacher's assistant while in college. The teacher and I took a week-long workshop and had a sub. The worst thing she did. Not letting the kids go potty. It was in kindergarten and she said all the kids going to bathroom were interrupting the class. One girl wet herself. School policy was if kids under a certain age had an accident the nurse would give them a pull-up, basically a diaper, to wear. The substitute proceeded to make fun of the girl for wear a diaper, calling her baby and such. The little girl ended facing repercussions at home too. It was devastating to hear about. I had a sub give out my cell phone number to my high school students so they could call me and give me excuses as to why they weren't taking their test while I was gone. I was livid. I complained to the sub office, and that teacher never subbed for my building again. Not a teacher but I participate in STEM programs a lot. In the 90s I belonged to a club that refurbished old industrial PCs and donated them to schools. Sometimes we'd get completely burned out motherboards or disk drives so I took a bunch of those and made displays showing the insides of computers, and I'd let the kids explore them as part of my session. Then I'd dig out a couple of blown PCs and monitors, hand out the screwdrivers and let them rip them apart. Yes, I was always careful around the old tube monitors. Once they were done I'd let them pick apart if they wanted to take home. The younger kids especially loved this, and frequently I'd see some kids take home a hard drive controller or a graphics card like it was a real treasure. I even made the local news with my program. That's the thing about living in a small city. Eventually everyone makes the news, so one day I went in to do my lesson at a high school, I think freshman or sophomore science class. The class had a substitute and I had an APPT right after that session, so I told them I'd come back to pick everything up the next day. The kids could take whatever they wanted from the old PCs, but please put my displays aside, in the cupboard. Next day I came by and all my displays were still out and they were completely trashed. Worse yet, the sub's attitude was, well, kids will be kids. That was the last session I did, ever, for that program. Accused a student of stealing something that the aide had put away. This was a class that contained some pretty rough students, including one suspended multiple times for fighting and some gang members. She decided to go after a sweet, petite girl that never caused trouble and was generally popular with her classmates. This set off the entire class, which is when the sub went ballistic and started wildly throwing accusations and yelling at said students. Security eventually got called and took several students out. My first clue was when the sub got my cell number from the staff directory and went off for 20+ minutes about how bad my students had been. This was followed up with an extremely long email and a 2-page written note on my desk, plus a concerned note from the administrator about not having appropriate sub plans. She didn't follow them in the first place and decided to throw me under the bus. The next morning when I arrived at school, the students were waiting for me at the door. Once I got them calmed down enough to tell their side of the story, we had a discussion on how they could have handled the situation differently. I promised them never to get that sub again. On a related note, I had a good relationship with said rough children because I treated them with respect and fairness. They usually behaved for me. Student here. TLDR. Sub demanded I turn over my heart monitor in front of the class. Junior year I was having major heart problems and had to wear a heart monitor 15 hours a day. It had a phone attached that when I had heart murmurs, it would send the data to my doctor. I was wearing it and started having heart issues. It buzzed and I went to click send when the sub demanded I turn over my cell phone. I started to explain why I couldn't and she snapped at me, so I lifted my shirt to show the wires and sensors strapped to my chest, in front of the class of 50 students. Choir class, I've never seen anyone's face drop that fast in my life. My 9th grade English teacher was fired, which is an entire other story, and the school had difficulty finding someone to fill the spot. We would have random subs, but they didn't really teach us, so eventually we had a different person babysit us each day or week. One time it was the very scary principal who just glared at us like we were convicts about to escape, the school's police officers who at least talked to us, and various teachers for one-day stints. I don't know why one of our 5 librarians couldn't have been in there going through grade-appropriate books at the least. We spent 2 to 3 months like that. I had left out, overnight, eggs that I was going to use in a science experiment the following day. I was out and thought nothing about it. I returned the following day and went looking for the eggs only to find them missing. Asked a student where they went and I was informed that the substitute took the class to the special education kitchen, hard-boiled them and ate them. I went to talk to my AP and was informed that the sub had called in sick for her job for that day, due to food poisoning. 1. Asked a deaf kid to take off his hearing aids. Kids tried to tell her he needs to them, but to her they look like headphones. She cried when was confronted by another teacher. 2. When I was in 6th grade, one fractured my wrist, but it was my dominant hand, so I had to poorly write with my right. Teacher forced me to write with my left while I had a cast. I couldn't even grasp the pencil. Cried a lot. Then a couple months go by and got my cast off. Sub told me to suck it up and write with my left hours after getting my cast off. I felt like jelly and intense pain. Teacher was fired at the end of 7th grade because of unnecessary complaints. Edit. I should have realized this was a teacher's question, not a student cue. This is considered my first post that I really thought wouldn't get noticed, and now my inbox is full of messages. To clear some questions, I would never steal someone's story, and both stories are very true but probably be something similar you have encountered before. Also, the teachers should know how to treat students in any situation whatsoever. If teachers really hate their jobs, don't include kids into it. I remember crying asking my mom, why does my teacher pick on me or make me do things I couldn't do? Had a substitute teacher in my high school French class show a movie that was straight up soft-core pornography, but tried to explain that since it was in French it was artistic. It was equally frustrating because while I wanted to see boobs, I also couldn't stop reading the subtitles because I had to understand what they were saying. The teacher did not come back the next day. Update. I went through all the comments and looked at everyone who suggested what movie it might be, and none of those movies were the one shown. This would have been in 2006 and the movie looked maybe late 90s or early 2000s. If I come across it, I will update this thread, but for all I know it could have been a porno in French. Went to sleep for 1.5 hours. My class was freaking amazing, the sweetest, most thoughtful group I've ever had. When I got back the next day, I asked how the sub was. Me, how was the sub? Them, he was fine. He kinda took a nap for a while. Me, what did you guys do? Them, worked quietly so that we wouldn't wake him up. Eventually we ran out of work, so we just had silent reading. Me, for how long? Them, from when we started working until it was time to go outside. Me, that's a really long time. Look, I am glad that you guys were so thoughtful, but if something like that ever happens again, please wake the sub up. It's not safe for the sub to sleep. He needed to be awake in case something happened. Them, we would have woken him up if we really needed to. But we also figured he probably really needed the sleep. Seriously, the sweetest class ever. I had a cool Chinese lucky cat that went missing after I had a sub. My students said the sub seemed really intrigued by it, talked about it several times, and even moved it from the shelf where it sat and brought it over to my desk. It was gone when I returned the next day. Unamused. Left my perfectly prepped and neat desk an absolute disaster, did not follow the lesson plan and took my gel pens. I've had so many bad subs. One sub made an elementary student cry insisting her own name was misspelled and made her stand up in front of the class and admit her name was spelled wrong. I asked that she not return, but I still saw her around as other teachers had her sub. Another one worth mentioning was supposed to be my sub for the last 2 weeks of school because I went on maternity leave, this time teaching at a 7th-12th grade school. Ignored all my sub plans, played on his cell phone the whole time, and then like 3 days in got upset at the students and told them off. And then they watched as he walked out to the parking lot and drove away. Thank goodness some kids went and told the office. When I came back it was like my room had been ransacked. It was awful. There was a harpsichord in the front of the classroom used both for demonstration and performance. Not knowing what he was doing, the sub tried to tune 3 notes that had gone mildly out of tune while I was away. He managed to break the strings on all 3 notes and left a message inside reading, "Sorry about that." She let the kids run wild and do whatever they wanted, first graders. I was out because my dad died. Thank God my team realized what happened and all pulled together and cleaned the room, put it back together before I returned to work. Thanks for watching. See you later.